Hey guys, tonight we slip into something most people never notice: how quiet Sparta really was. You hear Sparta and your mind lights up with spears clashing, warriors screaming, six-packs flexing under bronze armor. But what if I told you the loudest thing in ancient Sparta wasn't war? It was the silence of a wife sleeping alone, or not sleeping at all, while someone else's husband slipped through her door in the dark. That's the paradox that waits for you tonight. Not violence, but discipline. Not chaos, but ritual, and a kind of love that had rules too sharp to be romantic. Sparta didn't shout its truth. It whispered it through bare walls, hairless brides, and quiet arrangements no one dared to call betrayal. You probably won't survive this emotionally, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake by the end, drop your location and local time. I love knowing where this strange little story finds you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself walking barefoot on stone under a Spartan moon that doesn't care who you are. Everything around you is austere. No gold, no perfume, just olive trees, iron blades, and shadows with posture. Sparta isn't a city, it's a warning. A warning about what happens when survival becomes the only virtue and everything else a comfort, romance. Even your name gets melted down into usefulness. The women here are not background figures in history books. They're the architects of lineage, the managers of estates, and strangely, the ones who shared husbands like winter cloaks, not because they were weak, but because that's what the cold demanded. You lie down, maybe in a field, maybe on a woven mat in a stone room with no door. There's no battlefield here, not tonight. There's just a woman, in the dark, waiting for a man she's not allowed to talk to in daylight. She might have met him once. She might not know his name, but his seed has been approved, and her body, her lineage, her bloodline is ready. That's Sparta, and that's where you are now. You see, Spartans weren't interested in feelings. They were interested in strength. And strength came from order. Order came from control. And control over love, sex, and family was the job of the state. It's easy to say Spartan men were warriors, but what's harder to feel is what that meant for everyone else. Women, for example, didn't marry like the Athenians did. There were no big wedding feasts, no tender courtship strolls by the river. A Spartan bride didn't wear flowers. She didn't cry into her mother's arms. Instead, she shaved her head, dressed like a boy, hid in the dark, and waited. She wasn't waiting for her groom, not in the way we think. She was waiting for a man who already belonged to another woman. Because in Sparta, sharing husbands wasn't scandalous, it was standard. But we'll get there. For now, let's talk about this room, this night, this silence. It's important. You're in a world without locks, without love songs, without softness. That's not to say people didn't feel, it's just that feelings weren't permitted to interfere with design. And the Spartan design was brilliant in its cruelty. Imagine a society so obsessed with strength that it made weakness illegal, literally illegal. If your baby cried too much or looked too thin, it was discarded. If your emotions distracted you from duty, they were humiliated out of you. But here's the twist. While Spartan men were off in the Agog training, fighting, sleeping side by side in military barracks, Spartan women were building an entire second Sparta. A domestic Sparta, a whispering Sparta, and in that hidden city, women made arrangements. You see, women didn't just wait for husbands. They selected them, in a way, not directly, not romantically, but through a complicated mesh of gossip, bloodlines, and fitness reports. Because the goal wasn't happiness, the goal was to make more Spartans, and Spartans were not born by accident. If your husband was old or frail, and a younger, stronger man was available, you were expected, not allowed, expected to sleep with him, and not sneakily, legally, with permission. Sometimes your own husband would arrange it. Sometimes you would. Sometimes older women helped younger ones coordinate the encounter, like war generals drawing up battle maps. Can you feel the silence yet? It's not cold. It's hot, like pressure in your chest. This is not a story about passion, it's a story about roles, and the terrifying emptiness that fills the gaps between them. Spartan women were not suppressed in the way modern minds often imagine. They were respected, powerful, even feared. But that respect came with a price. They were not free to love as they chose. They were free to be useful, and if being useful meant lying with a stranger in the dark to produce a better soldier, then that's what was done. No questions, no candles, just duty, done in silence. Historians still argue whether this system was empowering or oppressive, whether Spartan women were liberated or just weaponized. But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the real question is, what do you become when the world asks you not to feel? You roll onto your side in the quiet. Maybe you hear a breeze, or maybe it's the sound of a soldier's sandals brushing the ground outside your door. He doesn't knock. He doesn't speak. He enters, does what he's been told to do, and leaves. Maybe he lingers, maybe not. You may never see him again. But if you give birth 9 moons later, the child will belong to Sparta, not to you. You'll raise him, feed him, train him, but he's not yours. Not really. Just another link in the chain. And chains are not for hugging. This is what no one tells you in school. That sometimes the past isn't brutal because of violence, but because of absence. Absence of warmth, absence of choice, absence of the small, human things we take for granted, like cuddling someone just because we feel like it. But don't drift too far just yet. We're only getting started. Next time, you'll wait in that dark room, and I'll tell you what happens when the man you married sends another man to your bed, because it's good for Sparta. You're sitting in the dark now, on woven cloth, your head freshly shaved, scalp still tingling from the cold blade that stripped your hair and your girlhood with it. You look like a boy. That was the point. In Sparta, a wedding night wasn't about flowers or laughter or lace. It was about discipline and performance and the terrifying certainty that your body, from this moment forward, would no longer belong to you. The ritual is simple. You're hidden in a dark room. There is no music, no family feast, no hand to hold, and the man who enters isn't even supposed to stay. He slips in, wordless, the smell of sweat and iron following him like a cloak. You don't see his face, not clearly. His body is lean, hard, trained by years of combat and communal sleep in the Agag barracks, where boys are stripped of softness and turned into shadows with swords. He doesn't say your name. You might not know his. That's how Spartan marriage begins. It's not intimacy, it's strategy. And it's not because you're unloved. It's because love is irrelevant. You don't marry to fall into each other's arms. You marry to merge lineages, secure bloodlines, and produce a body the state can train to kill. Your wedding isn't even public knowledge. In fact, you won't live with him after this. You'll stay in your family's house, and he'll sneak in at night if he can, assuming the barracks permit it. Some nights he won't come at all. You're not supposed to mourn that. You're supposed to be proud, because in Sparta, absence is a kind of honor. A man belongs first to the state. You're second, sometimes fifth, and you accept that because everyone else does too. Historians still debate whether this secrecy was romantic or militaristic. Some suggest it preserved desire through mystery. Others argue it simply deprioritized domestic life so the state could dominate every waking hour. Either way, the result is the same: a wife without a home, a husband without a face, and a marriage that begins in costume and ends in silence. The hair shaving is what sticks with you. It's not decorative, it's not temporary, it's a symbolic ungendering, a way to turn you into something neutral, something malleable, something that doesn't scream bride so much as receptacle. Spartan women were powerful, but that power came laced with a strange kind of erasure. You're important, yes, but not for who you are, for what you can produce. Children, strong ones, loyal ones, and to get that result, the system doesn't want distraction. Hair, a distraction, romance, a threat, feelings dangerous. Better to start with a blank slate. You sit there, scalp bare, in a dim room that smells like goat milk and cedar, and you wonder if anyone else feels like this. The answer is yes. Every Spartan bride before you did, and everyone after will. It's not a betrayal, it's a cycle. One you've been born into. shaped for, and now perform without protest. The man beside you isn't cruel. He's just distant. He was trained to follow orders, not feelings. He may have whispered something once, a single word duty. Maybe, but you're not even sure if it was to you or to himself. You lie still, and when he leaves, the door creaks just once. No goodbye. That's the last you'll hear from him this week. Maybe longer. You wrap a cloth around your bare head, and sleep comes slowly, not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. There's no morning after conversation, no shared breakfast. You rise before dawn, check the courtyard for footprints. None. He was careful. That's good. You wouldn't want anyone to know. Not because you're ashamed, but because it's not about you. This whole ritual, the sneaking, the shaving, the silence, it's not built for your emotions. It's built for outcomes. In fact, in many cases, the husband isn't even the one who comes to the door. He's given you permission to receive another man, one younger, stronger, more desirable in the eyes of Spartan eugenics. It's all sanctioned. There's no shame, just a kind of biological math. You are a vessel, he is a seed, and the garden must grow strong. So, the man who entered your chamber might not be yours at all. And that doesn't matter. You don't fall in love, you fall in line. This wasn't every case, of course. Historians still argue how widespread these arrangements were. Some claim they were rare exceptions. Others insist they were standard practice, disguised behind euphemism and Spartan brevity. What we do know is that Spartan brides were not supposed to bond emotionally, not in the way Athenians did. This was a different kind of society, one where passion was seen as disorder, and disorder could kill the polis. You remind yourself, again, that this is strength, that by surrendering control, you're displaying it, and you're not alone. There's a quiet network of women around you, older ones, wiser ones who've done this, who'll help you navigate it. One of them laughs softly as she oils your scalp with lavender, saying, "At least he didn't snore." You smile. That's as close to gossip as Sparta allows. There is no jealousy, only efficiency. You ask no questions. If you do, you'll get the same answer everyone else gets. It's for Sparta. You try not to imagine his face, or his wife's, or the fact that he might be with another woman tomorrow night. You try not to care, because you're not supposed to. Spartan women were trained to see love as weakness, and weakness as infection. But you're human, and some nights, your mind drifts. You picture a life where your husband stays, just once, just long enough to ask if you're cold. But then the rooster crows, you gather your things, you train, you supervise helot slaves, you inspect the grains, you speak firmly to a younger girl who forgot her chores, and no one ever asks how your night was, because they already know. It was necessary, it was efficient, it was for Sparta, and so were you. Maybe tomorrow, he'll return, or maybe someone else will. Maybe you'll be the one suggesting a match to another wife, because your husband is too old now and Sparta needs boys. You'll speak in code, a glance, a nod. You'll arrange the room, prepare the oil, close the shutters, not out of shame, but out of habit. This is how things work here, not with declarations, but with quiet consent, not with roses, but with ritual. You run your hand over your bare scalp and smile to yourself. The hair will grow back, or maybe it won't. Either way, you've joined the silence, and it welcomes you. You don't see him in daylight. That's the first rule. In Sparta, even after marriage, a man doesn't live with his wife not until he turns 30. And so, you wait. Days stretch into weeks, and your life moves without him, though his name is tied to yours like a thread you can't cut. You tend to the household, manage the estate, supervise the helots who labor in the fields, and all the while you wear your married status like a title more than a relationship. When you walk through the agora, other women nod not with envy, but with recognition. They know what it's like to be a bride in a city where men sleep beside shields, not spouses. The Agag still owns him. Every Spartan male belongs to that brutal educational system that raises boys into soldiers and men into state property. He wakes at dawn, drills with spear and shield, eats black broth that tastes like punishment, and sleep shoulder to shoulder with other warriors. There's a peculiar intimacy in that one forged not through affection, but through shared deprivation. You, on the other hand, have a house of your own. Spartan women don't disappear into their husband's home like in other Greek cities. No, you remain on your father's land, maintaining your family line, even as you technically marry out. This gives you space that's both empowering and isolating. Because while you command respect here, you're also a ghost in your husband's daily life. Historians still debate whether this strange separation was designed to prevent emotional entanglements or simply a byproduct of prioritizing military readiness over domestic cohesion. But either way, the effect is chilling. You can go days without hearing his voice. You can go weeks without his touch. And yet, you're expected to bear his children. You wonder sometimes what would happen if you didn't. Would the whispers start? Would another woman be selected to take your place? Not as wife, but as surrogate. It's not a threat, it's a structure. And in Sparta, structure is sacred. You train your body, because you must. Spartan girls don't embroider cushions. You wrestle. You run. You throw javelins under the sun. Your thighs are strong, and your voice is clear, and you are not ashamed to be seen sweating in the dirt. In fact, it's expected, because your body isn't ornamental, it's functional. And function means fertility, vitality, strength. The men in the Agag know this. They watch from a distance, or steal glances when they're allowed outside the barracks. But they cannot linger. That's not the point. Desire isn't cultivated here, it's contained. The irony, of course, is that in all this containment, something stranger grows. You start to forget what a traditional marriage might feel like. You stop fantasizing about shared meals or whispered affection. You start to think in logistics, in seasons, in cycles of planting and ovulation. You calculate, you prepare, you adapt. There's a certain peace in this. No false promises, no romantic disappointment, just clarity. You belong to a city that has no walls, because it claims its warriors are the only defense it needs. And yet, within every Spartan woman, there are walls higher than any fortress in Athens. Walls built not to keep men out, but to keep feelings in. Historians sometimes romanticize this detachment as strength. Others call it state-sponsored loneliness. You live somewhere in between. You find moments of levity. A friend jokes about her husband forgetting her birthday, then admits neither of them knows when it is. You laugh. It's a good laugh. It feels like rebellion. Not against him, but against expectation. Because in a society that demands you suppress, even a giggle is resistance. Still, you understand the stakes. Your husband isn't just one man. He's a node in Sparta's living organism. If he fails in training, he shames his unit. If he fails in fathering, he weakens the bloodline. And if you fail well, that's not really discussed. Spartan women are expected to succeed. Full stop. Failure smells like Athenian softness, and softness is Sparta's enemy. So you work, you lead, you spar. You gather other wives for synchronized dances that are half religion, half ritual signaling, designed to keep your bodies honed and your minds aligned with the state's pulse. You may be alone in your bed, but never in your purpose. And when he does come, rarely and without warning, it feels more like a visit from a diplomat than a lover. He speaks in short phrases. He comments on the harvest. He examines your form with clinical interest, like a trainer inspecting a horse. You offer him food, though he rarely eats it. Barrack life ruins the stomach for flavor. He stays only as long as is necessary. Sometimes that means 10 minutes. Sometimes a little more. He leaves before dawn, always. And you never speak of it afterward. You don't ask where he's been. You don't ask when he'll return. That's the code. It's not cruelty. It's compliance. You grow into this rhythm. You find strength in its predictability. You see other women falter, crying into olive-soaked cloth when a lover doesn't return for weeks. And you remind yourself not to be like them. Love makes you soft. You won't be soft. You'll be steel wrapped in linen. Still, at night, you do lie awake and wonder who is he. Really, not the man the city built, but the one beneath. Does he ever think of you? Is there another woman whose door he enters more often? Is there another you, in another stone house, brushing the same olive oil on her arms, hoping she matters, Historians still argue whether Spartan marriages had room for love at all. Some fragments suggest tenderness, shared rituals, small jokes, children raised with affection. Others deny it outright. Marriage in Sparta wasn't for love. It was for Sparta. And Sparta didn't care if you were happy. You roll over and listen to the night wind. Somewhere beyond the city limits, your husband is sleeping among 20 men, dreaming of battle, or maybe dreaming of nothing. They're trained not to dream, just as you're trained not to long. That's the trade piece for discipline, security for sacrifice, marriage without presence. But you knew this. Every Spartan girl does. They don't read you poetry here. They hand you a cloak, a field to run across, and a future carved by necessity. You think, briefly, of Athens, of women confined to their homes, forbidden from speaking in the assembly, dependent on male guardians. You don't envy them, at least in Sparta. You speak your mind, you hold property, you train your body, and you make decisions, quiet ones, shadowed ones, but yours nonetheless. So you breathe deeply, let the silence fill you, and remind yourself you are not alone. You are part of a design older than your name. Your husband may be a visitor, a whisper, a rumor with muscles, but you are Sparta's daughter, and you do not wait. You endure. You don't feel jealous, not in the way other women from other cities might. That emotion, so common in places like Athens or Thebes, has no soil in Sparta. It doesn't take root here. Instead, you've been raised to admire strength, even if it doesn't sleep beside you. You've learned not to ask who else your husband visits, because the answer is never hidden. And worse, it's not even scandalous. He might be with another woman tonight, not because he loves her, but because her family line is strong, her hips wide, her shoulders square, and the state has gently nudged him toward her. You might have done the same. That's the way of it. Husbands are shared, not stolen. And somehow, you don't resent it. You were never promised exclusivity, only responsibility. From the time you could run, you were trained to see other women not as romantic rivals, but as co-builders of Sparta's future. You remember foot races, limbs pumping in sun-scorched fields, girls shoulder-checking each other into dust while elders watched with folded arms, the girl who wins admired, the girl who loses not mocked, but expected to try again. Every lesson was a preparation, not just for childbirth, but for coexistence. Sharing was never soft. It was sharp, a form of strategy. And now, as a wife, you find it easier to feel pride when your husband visits a younger woman who hasn't yet conceived. You know why he's there. You know she didn't beg for it. You know it was arranged, and likely approved by you. Historians still puzzle over this. Could women truly accept such open arrangements without resentment? Some say Spartan women had no choice. Others suggest they believed in the system because they helped build it. And you're not interested in outsider theories. You only know this when your friend conceives after months of quiet visits. You bring her herbs for morning sickness and show her how to sit when the pain tightens in her back. There is no bitterness. There is relief. Sparta needs boys. The pressure is always there, soft and suffocating like wool around the throat. If the men cannot provide the next generation alone, the women must collaborate, not out of desperation, but design. So, you do. And maybe, in a strange way, that's love, not romance, not candlelight, but a kind of collective loyalty, not to a man, but to the city. You tell yourself this on quiet evenings, combing oil through your now regrowing hair. You don't expect him tonight. He's probably at the barracks, or another house, or maybe he's simply too tired. You're not offended. You keep your body strong anyway. You train with other women, your muscles lean and purposeful. When you pass each other on the training grounds, there are nods, smirks, raised brows, not flirtation recognition. You see the same thing in her eyes that's in yours: duty, pride, and the strange calm that comes when desire no longer clouds the path. You sometimes think about what it would be like to love only one man, to hold him every night, to grow old with his stories and his breath beside you, but that's a kind of softness you were taught to outgrow. There are no lullabies in Sparta, only lullabies of bone and spear. Still, there are moments, small, human moments that slip through the armor. One evening, while weaving, you look up and see him in the doorway. No warning, no orders, just him, breathing quietly, shadows painting his face. You don't rise immediately. You finish your thread, tie it off, then you stand. He steps inside. You smell the barracks on him smoke, sweat, boiled broth. He does not speak, and neither do you. But his fingers brush your arm, and for one suspended breath, it feels almost like connection. Not duty, not arrangement, just presence. It doesn't last. Nothing does. He stays an hour, maybe less, but you remember it differently. You replay the brush of his hand, the exact angle of his jaw when the lantern flickered. You tuck that memory somewhere private, because in a world where intimacy is rationed like grain, even a glance can feed you for weeks. Later, you sit with another woman. She's older, already a mother. She talks casually about sharing her husband with a younger wife-to-be. It's not sharing, she says, cracking olive pits between her fingers. It's multiplying. You nod. You understand. One man, 2 women, 3 children, and a city that survives. But it isn't just math. There's emotion here, buried under discipline. Not jealousy, but yearning. You yearn, sometimes. Not for exclusivity, but for attention freely given. Not because it's time. Not because you're ovulating, but because he wants to. That's a dangerous thought. You discard it. You're better than that. Spartan women don't pine. Spartan women produce, yet still, at dusk, you sometimes look out over the rooftops and wonder where he is. Not to control him, just to know. Not because he's yours, but because he's part of something you've agreed to believe in, and that belief, cold, mathematical, unyielding, needs anchors. The city offers you rituals, statues, songs, dances in moonlight, but it doesn't offer comfort. That must come from each other, from women sitting close, knees touching, eyes telling the truth that mouths cannot. You've learned to interpret a sigh, a lingering glance, the way someone braids her hair tighter after being visited. That's your language now. Quiet solidarity. And it's enough. Most nights, the younger girls sometimes ask if it's hard. Sharing. You smile. You tell them it's like a relay. One runner passes the baton, not because she's tired, but because it's how you win. They don't understand yet, but they will. Historians speculate that this system broke many hearts. Perhaps it did. But it also built a society that lasted longer than most of its enemies. Sparta outlived siege after siege, not because its warriors were unbeatable, but because its women refused to be weak. And weakness, in Sparta, isn't just crying, it's wanting too much. Wanting what others cannot give freely. Wanting to possess. You've let go of that want. Mostly, occasionally, it flickers. But like any well-trained Spartan, you smother it. One breath, one blink. It's gone. You walk to the edge of the property and feed the dogs. You throw bones with calm precision, and the animals obey without question. They are loyal. They do not complain. You envy them a little, but only a little, because even they must be trained. And you, well, you were trained too, and in this strange, quiet, brutal way. You've mastered the art of sharing without needing, surviving without clinging, and loving just enough to endure. You wake before the sun, as always, and you stretch in silence, spine crackling like old timber, not because you are weak, but because you sleep stiff, alert, always half listening. There are no locks in Sparta, not on your door, not on your heart. You think about that often, not in a poetic way, but practically. Your door isn't barred because nothing here is owned in the private sense, not even intimacy, not even time. Your husband doesn't need a key. He enters when he is allowed, or when he is sent, or when neither of you chooses, but both comply. And yet, oddly, you do not feel unsafe. There are no thieves here. There's nothing to steal. Everyone already belongs to Sparta, and what is Spartan cannot be possessed, not by individuals, not by lovers, not even by mothers. And so you rise, dress quickly, and cross the threshold into a city without secrets. Sparta has no city walls. Everyone in the world found that strange Athens, Corinth, even Persia. But the Spartans simply said, "Our men are our walls." What they don't say is what women know, that the real fortification lies not in spears, but in silence. Your neighbor sees you in the street and nods. You pass a helot pushing a wooden cart full of bitter greens. You make a note to ask about the grain delivery. And then you stop, briefly, before the shrine to Artemis Orthia, not to pray. Exactly. But to align. You don't ask the gods for comfort. You ask for clarity. Spartan worship isn't about pleading. It's about pattern. Even the divine is a kind of discipline. You continue walking, bare feet scuffing dust, and you think, not for the first time, that the open structure of your city mirrors your own soul. No walls, no locks, but inside endless surveillance, not from above, from within. You monitor yourself, your movements, your emotions, because in Sparta, privacy is weakness. The closer things are kept, the more they stink. So everything is aired, exposed, shared. Even husbands, especially husbands. You still hear the whispers sometimes. Among younger girls, curious, embarrassed, hopeful. They ask if sharing feels like defeat. You always say the same thing. Nothing in Sparta is yours alone. Not your body, not your husband, not even your grief. They blink at you, unsure if it's a warning or a comfort. It's both. The openness of this place isn't freedom. It's a kind of control. The absence of walls isn't about trust. It's about exposure. There's nowhere to hide. And so, instead of resisting it, you lean in. You create alliances, not secrets. You manage other women's expectations as carefully as you manage the storeroom. You offer your advice before it's asked. You notice which wives are looking restless. You redirect their energy. "He won't come tonight," you say, gently, about a man too proud or too tired. "But perhaps another will." They nod. They trust you. You're not the oldest wife, but you are one of the wisest. You know how to rearrange emotions like furniture, how to fold pain into the corners of daily life so that it does not spill over. You understand the rhythm of this society openness enforced by discipline, and discipline polished into ritual. You think of the nights when your husband entered your home as quietly as a thought. He came with purpose. He did not linger. And yet, there was something reverent about his silence. As if, despite the arrangement, despite the design, he still saw you. Maybe. Or maybe you only imagined it. Historians still wonder whether Spartan men felt affection for their wives, whether the absence of romantic narrative meant an absence of emotion. You suspect not. You suspect there were moments, hidden like coals under ash, where tenderness flickered, but there was no language for it. And without language, it passed like wind through reeds. You don't mourn that. Not anymore. You've made peace with the openness, with the strange comfort of a life in full view. Your courtyard has no high fences. Your voice is measured in tone, never shrill, never weak. You don't slam doors you don't have any to slam. And that's not metaphor. It's architecture. Spartan homes are plain, functional, built from clay and wood and realism. You often wonder how other cities breathe in their cluttered, walled houses, their women hidden behind embroidered veils. You can't imagine it. What do they do with all that privacy, all that pretense? You scrub your stone floor in the morning light and feel the coolness of truth against your fingers. Everything is seen, everything is known, even your pain, especially your pain. You've cried in a public before. Once, after a child was born, too small, too quiet. The elders took him. You didn't protest, but your tears fell. No one stopped you. No one comforted you. They watched, then they left. Because in Sparta, pain is not something to be concealed. It is something to be endured, out loud, with posture. And so you do. You carry grief like water in a jar, balanced, visible, but never spilling. You recall the time another wife's man was reassigned. Not for failure, just optimization. Her arms had grown thin after the harvest season. A stronger girl was chosen. She didn't argue. She simply moved her bedding to another part of the house, and when the new girl arrived, she showed her how to warm the stones for winter. There was no hatred, only realignment. That's the word you use in your head. Not betrayal, not replacement. Realignment. Sparta doesn't tolerate emotional clutter. It trims, adjusts, recycles, and yet, in all this openness, you have your private corners. Not hidden, exactly, but quiet. Your garden. The smell of time crushed underfoot. The way one particular jar in the kitchen tilts ever so slightly on its shelf. The dream you have sometimes of a river you've never seen. Somewhere green, somewhere not Spartan. These are your personal myths. You don't speak them. You let them hum beneath the surface like an underground spring. And in a world of open doors and shared husbands, they are yours alone. You return home before dusk. The sky is a fading bruise, soft purple bleeding into ash. You pass another woman older, with salt in her braid, and nod. She doesn't smile, but her eyes do. You understand each other. You always have. Neither of you expects fidelity. Neither of you believes in possession, but both of you carry memories small, sharp ones that sit in the ribs like slivers. They don't hurt unless you breathe too deeply. And so, you keep your breath even. You open your door, you light the oil lamp, and you sit alone in a city with no walls, no locks, and no illusions. You don't talk about it openly, but you feel it like smoke beneath the floorboards. The pressure to produce, not love, not happiness, not even loyalty. Just children, healthy, full-lunged, thick-limbed boys who will one day carry shields as tall as themselves and disappear into the Agage with heads held high. That is the true unspoken contract of marriage in Sparta. Not that you will belong to a man, but that your womb will belong to the city. You know it before you bleed for the first time. The older women make sure of that. They don't tell you stories of romance or adventure. They tell you the birth statistics of your ancestors. Your mother bore 3 sons before the age of 20. Your aunt failed to deliver after her second, and the household diminished. No one needs to say what happens when you fail. You simply fade, not exiled, not punished, just reduced. The silent gravity of expectation pulls you toward conception like an invisible rope. You feel it even now, as you stand beneath the olive tree and watch 2 boys wrestle in the dust. One of them may have been born from an arrangement like yours, a calculated pairing, a quiet agreement in the dark. You wonder if his mother flinched, if she was proud, or both. In Sparta, the line between dignity and detachment is almost invisible, and dignity is all you're allowed to have. You've seen the way the elders look at bellies measuring not just their curve, but their timing. They keep quiet notes in their heads who conceived after 1 season, who took longer, who bore girls instead of boys. No one says it aloud, but you hear the absence in their voices. She's still slim. They murmur, and everyone knows what that means. You aren't slim. Not anymore. Your body has changed. Hips heavier, breasts fuller, a quiet bloat just beneath your navel. Maybe you don't speak of it yet. You wait. You listen to your own heartbeat at night, trying to detect another pulsing alongside it. You keep working. You knead dough. You supervise fields. You run, even now. Because Spartan women don't let their bodies soften into comfort. Fitness is fertility. Strength is seduction. If the city wants sons, the body must look ready to produce them. And if it doesn't, then perhaps someone else's body will. There's no shame in that. Not here. You've watched it happen before. A wife approaching 30, still childless, suggesting to her husband softly, rationally, that he consider another woman. A younger one, a faster one, a stronger one. Sometimes she chooses the woman herself. Sometimes the elders do. Historians still argue how voluntary these exchanges really were. Was it free will or quiet coercion dressed in Spartan lace? You think it doesn't matter. In a city built for endurance, choice is an illusion. There's only alignment. You once heard a visiting merchant say Spartans breed like horses. At first, you were furious. Then you laughed, because he wasn't entirely wrong. The difference is horses don't know they're being bred. You do, and you participate anyway, willingly, because if you succeed, if your body gives Sparta what it wants, you rise, you gain standing, voice, weight. A mother of sons is not merely respected, she is feared, because she has created what the city lives and dies for. You've seen it the way women walk taller once they've borne sons, the way even commanders lower their eyes in respect when a mother passes by. You want that, not out of vanity, out of necessity. Power here isn't ornamental, it's protective. A woman who proves her value becomes harder to dismiss. You think about this at night, when you lie alone and feel the slight pull in your belly. You imagine the cells dividing, the pulse forming. You imagine him, your son, standing one day in the phalanx, shield polished, eyes steady, body forged from your hunger, your pain, your silence. You don't tell anyone, not yet. You wait for signs, a missed cycle, a swelling, a certainty. Until then, you perform your duties as always. You attend the fertility dances, the sanctioned festivals where young men and women pair off in athletic displays of grace and strength. You remember when it was your turn, your bare feet on the stone, your limbs fluid under moonlight. The way he looked at you then, not with desire, but with calculation. You didn't mind. You wanted to be chosen. Now, you watch the next group of girls and wonder who among them will step into this rhythm next. You feel older now, though you aren't yet 30. In Sparta, a woman's bloom is measured not in beauty, but in birth. You run your fingers over your stomach. The skin is taut, the curve is small, but it's there. You let yourself smile. You allow one whisper into the wind. Please, not to a god, to your own body. Not for love, for purpose, because if this seed takes root, everything changes. Not in your marriage. Spartan husbands do not suddenly become affectionate, but in your place, your footing, your name, you will be mother of, and that title will protect you more than any man ever could. You've seen women without it always waiting, always wondering if tonight's visit will be the last. They keep their tunics a little neater, speak a little sweeter, hoping to be remembered. You don't want that fate. You want assurance. And in Sparta, assurance is spelled in flesh. You remember the stories. Women who bore triplets and were awarded extra land. Women whose sons died heroically and were granted public honors. There are no lullabies in this city, but there are monuments. Your son might be one of them. You rest a hand on your abdomen. It's still too early to be sure, but your body feels different, more aware, more alert, like the city itself has crept into your blood. You say nothing to the other women. Not yet. They'll know soon enough. They always do. Spartan women are experts in observation. You notice the angle of someone's hips, the way she carries water, the way she sips broth with more salt than usual. These are the signs. These are the codes. You once told a girl who didn't even know she was pregnant that she wept. You held her, briefly, no more than a moment, because tenderness, in excess, weakens resolve. But you allowed her that moment, and you hope someone will allow it to you when the time comes, if it comes. For now, you go about your day. The sky's bright, the streets are dry. A boy is sharpening a stick into a makeshift spear. He is 7. You nod at him. He nods back. There's no fear in him. That's the goal. That's why you do all of this. Not for legacy. Not for love. For the city. Because in Sparta, a baby is not born into a family. He is born into a battlefield. And you are the first front line. You don't choose who fathered your child, not really. You think you do. But the choice has already been whispered through the corridors of the gymnasium, passed from elder to elder, weighed like bronze on a scale. You know this because the man who came to you 2 seasons ago wasn't your husband. He wasn't even someone you'd spoken to before. He was selected, praised for his agility, his victories in the running fields, his family's long line of service. Your husband had approved it without bitterness, without hesitation. He had even joked about it afterward, in that dry Spartan way, if he's faster than me. Perhaps he deserves the night. You smiled then, politely, as expected, but deep down, something colder curled inside you. Because that night wasn't about affection or mutual desire. It was about metrics, lineage, precision, the way a good spear must be balanced just right to hit the mark. And you were the shaft, he, the tip. Together, you were supposed to strike. You remember the man, tall, younger, silent. He entered your chamber like a soldier, not a suitor. He bowed barely, removed his sandals. Then nothing, no words, no prelude, just flesh and form and function. You didn't speak either, not because you were ashamed, but because you weren't supposed to. In Sparta, the fewer the words, the cleaner the transaction. This wasn't romance, this was breeding. And yet, afterward, as he dressed and vanished into the stone night, you lay there with your eyes open, staring at the wooden beams above your head, wondering if the seed had taken. You weren't angry, you weren't heartbroken, but something in you shifted. A quiet, irreversible tilt, like the weight of your identity moved just slightly off-center. You weren't just a wife, you weren't even a lover. You were a vessel, officially recognized, officially permitted. Historians still struggle with this. They can't decide if it was liberating or appalling that Spartan women bore children by men not their own. They argue about power, about agency, about whether consent meant anything when the state dictated the rhythm of your womb. But you don't need philosophers to interpret what you've lived. It is not as simple as submission or strength. It's something murkier. You agreed to this because you had to, but also because it made sense. Your husband was aging. His last child by another woman had been born sickly and died in the first year. He knew what that meant. He didn't sulk. He strategized. And you did too. Because in Sparta, you don't survive by wishing things were different. You survive by adapting, faster than grief, cleaner than doubt. So you accepted the arrangement. You readied your body. You prepared the linens, the oil, the silence. You performed your duty without flinching. But now, weeks later, you feel something else, a pulse not just in your belly, but in your thoughts. You wonder what it means that your child may grow up never knowing who sired him, or worse knowing, and not caring. Because in Sparta, fatherhood is almost a suggestion. The real parent is the city. The Agagi will raise him. The elders will break him down and remake him. And you will watch from a distance, allowed to care, but not interfere. You've seen it happen before. A mother waves goodbye to a 7-year-old with strong legs and defiant eyes. She says nothing as he's taken. She holds her back straight until the boy disappears around the corner. Then, if she's wise, she walks away immediately. She does not cry. She does not ask when she'll see him again, because no one knows. He is no longer hers. He is Sparta's, and Sparta is greedy. You press your hand to your stomach again, almost protectively, and catch yourself. You withdraw it. You remind yourself that attachment, though natural, is dangerous. Not because it weakens the child, but because it weakens you. You saw one woman fall apart when her son was beaten during Agog's drills. She pleaded with an elder, she begged, and then she was dismissed. Not punished, just erased. Her voice was no longer welcome. She had broken the code. A Spartan mother must love with the restraint of a soldier. No coddling, no softness, only pride and silence. So, you practice. Even now, you whisper affirmations not to the child inside you, but to the city outside. Let him be strong. Let him be needed. Let him survive what I cannot protect him from. This is motherhood here. It is not tender. It is tactical. And yet, in the early mornings, when you sit alone by the olive press and watch the sun lift its thin arms over the rooftops, you allow one indulgence a name. You haven't spoken it aloud. You haven't told anyone. But in your mind, he already has a name. A simple one. Solid. Like stone. You don't even care if it's a boy or girl. The name remains the same. Because even daughters must be strong. Even daughters may be needed. You remind yourself of that as you pass a girl leaping over a training pit. Her limbs brown with sun and her teeth bared in joy. That could be yours. And if so, you'll raise her to run faster than the men. to speak with precision, to be feared not for her charm, but her clarity. This is your offering to Sparta, not just flesh, but future. And still, beneath that, there lingers the quiet thought you try not to feed. What if you had been allowed to choose? What if you had lain with a man not because the state selected him, but because you wanted him? What would it feel like to have a child born of that kind of desire? Dangerous thinking. You swat it away like a fly, because desire complicates duty, and duty is survival. You learned that the hard way, long ago, when another wife cried over a lover she was forbidden to keep. She wasted away, not from punishment, from yearning. No one saved her, not even the women, because in Sparta, we don't nourish delusion. We prune it. You return home before dusk. The wind is dry. You water the thyme. You prepare your evening meal in silence. And before sleep, you touch your belly one last time, not with softness, but with steel in your fingertips. This is not yours. It never was. But for now, it's with you. And that, for a Spartan woman, is enough. You learn not to flinch when another woman touches your husband's arm. Because in Sparta, jealousy is not just frowned upon, it's irrational. There's no script here for possessiveness. No tragic stories of love triangles. No drama carved into temple walls. No myths about husbands stolen in the dark. Here, a woman's worth is not threatened by another's presence. Because you all serve the same God strength. You're not wives in the way poets romanticize. You're comrades. You're co-architects of a city that does not reward emotion unless it leads to action. You remember the first time it stung the sharp glint in your chest when you saw him step into her doorway, a girl barely past 17, fresh from her first dance, still high on the adrenaline of being seen. She smiled at him the way you once did, but you swallowed it, not the moment your reaction. You turned the sting into a step, into movement, into purpose. That night, you trained longer, wrestled harder. You burned the softness out of your own thoughts like fat off meat. And in the morning, you greeted her as you always had, calm, open, whole. Because here, we do not compete, we coordinate. A child born of her body will be no less Spartan than one born of yours. And that is what matters. Not who he visits, not whose hand he holds longer. What matters is the outcome, the future, the strength of the next link in the chain. You've seen women falter Athenians, mostly brought here through alliances or misfortune, confused by the cold order of it all. They ask, "Don't you care? Doesn't it hurt?" You tilt your head, as if considering, and you say, "It did, once. But then I learned that pain is a teacher, and jealousy is a child. It's not that you feel nothing, it's that you feel wisely. You've trained your emotions like war dogs, loyal, controlled, deadly, if released without cause. And so you sit with the others at the well, filling jars and exchanging news whose grain harvest was largest, whose husband is away on training, who might be with child. No one whispers gossip, not because it's forbidden, but because it's unnecessary. Everything here is known, seen. There are no scandals when nothing is secret. Historians still debate whether this absence of jealousy made Spartan women more liberated or more repressed. Some say it freed them from romantic bondage. Others claim it stripped them of emotional truth. You think it doesn't matter. It worked. Sparta endured longer than most of its enemies, and not by accident, by design, and you're part of that design. You don't love your co-wives like sisters, but you don't hate them either. You respect them, you observe, you advise, you sometimes laugh with them, but always in a measured way, like soldiers on rest between battles, because anything more than that risks expectation, and expectation breeds disappointment. You don't expect fidelity, you don't expect affection, you expect contribution, loyalty to the state, precision in speech, efficiency in motherhood, and if you're lucky, occasional softness, like the other day, when the woman he visited last week brought you olives. No explanation, just a gesture. You nodded, took them, and in that moment, you both understood not kindness, not apology, just recognition. You're on the same path, different legs, same direction. That's what Spartan marriage is, less a union, more a relay. You take the baton when it's your turn, you pass it when duty demands. You do not drop it, ever. You remember a story passed down from your mother of a woman who did let jealousy in. She demanded her husband stay only with her. She wept. She pleaded. She spoke of the sanctity of marriage. And within weeks, she was quietly replaced. Not exiled, not disgraced, just restructured out of relevance. Her name was not spoken again. Not out of cruelty, but because names are for legacies. And hers had ended. You carry that story like a parable, sharpening yourself against it every time your heart flutters in the wrong direction. You're better than that. You have to be. Because a Spartan woman is not fragile. She does not cling. She adapts. She conquers emotion like a battlefield. That's your pride. That's your power. And when he returns to you, perhaps after days, perhaps after seasons, you don't ask where he's been. You don't ask what he felt. You offer water, warm his hands, lie with him in silence. Because this is not about love. It's about legacy. And if he stays longer this time, if his eyes linger, you don't mistake it for affection. You accept it as rhythm. Sometimes the current flows your way, sometimes not. But the river belongs to no one, only Sparta. You've learned to see the other women as terrain, not obstacles. Some are rough, sharp-edged, others smooth, predictable. You navigate them with ease. And when you speak together, sewing or sorting lentils, you don't pretend. You talk about bloodlines, not feelings, about seasons, not size, because anything softer would sink you. And you intend to rise, even now, as you train in the yard, feet pounding earth, breath steady. You feel the freedom that comes from clarity. You don't have to wonder where you stand. You know, your worth is measurable, in calves that run, in arms that hold, in wombs that carry. No one tells you what to feel. No one expects you to pretend. And that, oddly, is its own kind of intimacy. Spartan marriage is not private, but it is precise. It does not bind its lines. And that alignment, though cold, is comforting. It tells you who you are, what you're for, where you fit. That's more than most people ever get. And at night, when you lie awake, alone or not, you breathe deeply, not because you are content, but because you are ready for whatever the city requires, for whatever the next season brings. Whether it's another child, another wife, or another battle, you will meet it without flinching, because you've killed the part of you that clings, and in its place, you've grown something harder, something cleaner, something Spartan. You remember being a girl and being told, quite seriously, to wrestle the boy who teased you, not to pout, not to report him to a parent, but to pin him, cleanly, on red dust under white sky. As others circled and watched, you were 10, he was 12, he lunged, you stepped, he slipped, you pressed. When your elbow found his ribs and your knee met his thigh, you heard him grunt, but not in pain. In recognition, afterward, he looked at you differently, not with fear, with respect. In Sparta, that's how affection begins, not with gifts or glances, but with the sound of breath being forced from someone's lungs, as they realize you are their equal, or stronger. You grew up that way, not tamed, but trained. And the girls around you weren't soft companions. They were rivals, instructors, mirrors. You learned to shout from your diaphragm, to run until your chest split, to throw discus and javelin with wrists so sure they ached. No one told you to be graceful. You were told to be fast, efficient, undeniable. And that's why when the time came for pairing what other cities might call courtship, you were ready. You didn't have to be coy. You had already been seen, sweaty and triumphant, at the training grounds. You already had the attention of the elders, of the mothers, of the men. You didn't need a dowry. Your value gleamed from the tension in your calves, from the way you met every gaze with calm calculation. Spartan girls are not raised to chase husbands. They are raised to be selected like champions. And so, when you hear outsiders talk about womanly virtues, meekness, modesty, softness, you laugh, not mockingly, but curiously, because you've never been told to lower your voice. Quite the opposite. You've been trained to speak clearly, command space, and never apologize for your presence. Historians often marvel at this. Spartan women are louder, freer, more physical than nearly any in the ancient world. But they forget something. It isn't freedom for freedom's sake. It's function. You were trained this way not for indulgence, but for contribution. Because if Sparta were to survive, every child born must be the product of strength, not subservience. And so, women were sculpted not for beauty, but for durability, for purpose. You remember the choral festivals, when girls competed in public, singing war songs in harmony, not as a quaint ritual, but as a declaration, we are as vital as the men you arm with spears. And they listened. They had to, because a city where men are bred to die must raise women capable of withstanding the silence they leave behind. You've seen the younger girls now, in your shadow. One leaps across the training trench with better form than you had at her age. You're not jealous. You're proud, because her strength strengthens you. That's the paradox you live inside. Every woman is your rival and your reinforcement. There's no bride school here, no embroidery classes, only endurance. And if you cry, fine, but do it while holding a weight. Do it while running. Do it while winning. You still remember your own first victory. The crowd didn't cheer, they nodded. That was better. No noise, just acknowledgement. And when a boy once challenged you to a rematch after losing, your instructor said, "Good. Let him learn how defeat shapes him." He lost again, but this time, he thanked you. That boy, he later became your husband, or as close as one could be in Sparta. You didn't marry him because of love. You married him because you were matched, and you respected him, because he didn't flinch when you beat him, and he didn't brag when he won. He understood the balance, the dance, the quiet contract. You wonder now, sometimes, if he remembers that first match the way you do, not as a battle, but as a beginning. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. He doesn't talk much. Spartan men are not raised to confess. They are raised to obey, to strategize, to endure. But every so often, you catch a glance from him, quick and flat and real. It's not tenderness, but it's not nothing, and that's enough. You've stopped craving the kind of affection you read about in Athenian plays, all those sonnets, all that longing. You don't need it. You have sweat, you have breath, you have outcome, and sometimes, when your bodies meet not under moonlight, but in the tight precision of purpose, you feel something close to admiration, mutual recognition, shared calculus. It's not romantic, but it's real. And real lasts longer. So when you hear another woman ask, shyly, if it's true that Spartan women can beat their husbands in wrestling, you nod. If she can, she should. And the others laugh, not because it's a joke, but because it's obvious. Strength isn't masculine here. It's mandatory. For everyone. Your mother taught you how to clean a wound and how to open one. Your aunt taught you how to stitch cloth and how to stitch flesh. There was no separation, no duality, only necessity. You carry a small knife now, not for violence, but for utility. And when you sharpen it, you think of the words your grandmother whispered once, hands wrapped around yours as you carved your first handle. Sharp things don't have to be loud. Neither do you. You walk through Sparta now as a woman who does not flinch, does not soften for the sake of being liked. You're not cruel, but you are firm. And when the men train, they do not dismiss you. They nod, as they once did when you leapt further than their brothers. And the boys stare not in lust, but in aspiration, because they know this is what made them. This is who bore them. This is who shapes their future wives. You're not decoration. You are foundation. And in a city that trusts no wall but its own body, you're part of the wall. They'll never say it outright. Spartans don't praise, but they do not forget. You've trained your daughter to walk with her shoulders back, to laugh with her mouth wide, to pick up stones and assess their weight without asking permission. She knows her place already, and it is not beneath anyone. You watch her spar with a boy in the courtyard and feel no fear, just a ticking in your chest that might be pride or memory or both, because once that was you, and now it is hers. This is how Spartan women pass on their legacy, not in lullabies, but in lunges, not in whispers, but in war cries. And if you raise her right, she will never beg to be held. She will not ask for a seat at any table. She will make one, build one, defend one, and if someone touches her wrong, she'll break his wrist before he finishes the thought. That's the gift you've been given, and the one you now give. No shame, no hesitation, no apology, only strength, as it was, as it will be. Because here, girlhood is not something you grow out of. It is something you sharpen, into womanhood, into legacy, into Sparta. You sit beneath the terrace beam, legs folded, sunlight stretching across the clay tiles like a second skin, and you think, not for the first time, about how much power a Spartan woman holds. Quietly, invisibly, absolutely. The men are out again, training or patrolling or drilling somewhere far beyond the Orange Hills, and the city is, for all practical purposes, yours. That's the part no one from the outside understands. They see warriors, spears, shields, but what they miss is that while the men are being sculpted into weapons, it's the women who hold the tools of inheritance, agriculture, estate, and control. Your husband doesn't own this house. You do. The land around it, yours. The olive grove to the east, and the stony vineyard to the west. Yours to manage, to cultivate, to pass down. In Sparta, unlike anywhere else in Greece, women can own property outright, not just as caretakers, as rulers. And you don't rule it like a sentimental matron, but like a general. Every plot, every slave, every coin from the grain markets cataloged, calculated, overseen by your hand. You're not doing this as a kindness. You're doing it because someone must. Because Sparta, for all its noise and posture, is a city held together by what happens when the shouting stops. When the warriors leave, it's your voice that organizes, your eyes that detect rot, your memory that tracks the last good yield of barley before the drought. And the men may train to bleed, but you train to notice, to plan, to endure. Historians rarely write about this. They write about battles, kings, the agoge. But what they always miss, is that a state built on war cannot function without a core of women strong enough to swallow absence like air. You do not cry when the men march out. You do not collapse into the earth. You account for it. Adjust rations, reassign labor, keep the estate running without a flicker of fragility. Because fragility here is more dangerous than any spear. You've seen Athenian wives, visiting cousins maybe, fluttering with their veils and soft sandals, glancing nervously at the Spartan courtyards where women walk bare-legged and bronze-skinned, issuing orders to helots and boys alike. They whisper about impropriety, about shamelessness, about how no respectable woman would speak that way, stand that way, own that much. And you smile, not in contempt, but in pity, because they've mistaken silence for virtue, dependency for honor. In Sparta, a woman's silence is only valuable when it's strategic. Otherwise, you speak, you command, you correct. And when a man returns from war and steps over your threshold, he does not ask how the household fared. He assumes you handled it, because of course you did. He wouldn't have left if he thought otherwise. You remember the first time you were left in charge of your mother's estate. She had fallen ill after the third frost. Your father was already dead, your brother gone to the northern border, and the estate fell to you not by ceremony, but by default. You were 15. You kept records. You calculated surplus. You fired a lazy worker. You saved the season. No one praised you. That's not the Spartan way. But no one questioned you again. From then on, your voice in household matters was considered binding, not anecdotal, not decorative, binding. And the other women came to you, slowly at first, then often. What would you trade for 2 amphorae of Kithrin wine? Should we barter grain now or wait for the storm to pass? You never raised your voice. You never rushed. You answered like stone answers, rain evenly. And now, even as a wife, your household does not defer to a man. When your husband returns, he knows better than to disrupt what functions. He does not condescend. He does not lecture. He asks only what you've decided, and whether he should follow suit. It's not submission, it's sense. Spartan men understand that control is not strength when it breaks what works. So they leave the household to you, the accounts, the estate, the futures of sons too young to hold spears, and you don't waste it. You grow into the role like a second skin. You know the lineage of your neighbor's children, the number of sheep grazing beyond the ridge, the price of timber in Messenia. You're not ornamental, you are vital. And you carry this power not with pride, but with precision. Because the state may not give you a seat at the assembly, but it gives you everything else. Land, leverage, legacy. You've seen other cities crumble under the weight of absent men, but not Sparta. Here, absence is the architecture. It is the condition on which everything else is built, and women are the mortar, the quiet scaffolding, the invisible logic. That's the hidden paradox of this city. It exalts discipline and death, but it survives because of women who do not break. You think about that often as you sit on the terrace and watch 2 slaves argue about which jar to lift first. You don't yell, you raise a brow, they settle it, you nod, and your daughter watches. Not just your daughter by blood, the other girls too. They're watching all the time, watching how you move, how you correct without chaos, how you assign without apology. You are their blueprint, and you intend to leave them with a version of womanhood that isn't soft-spoken or easily erased. You want them to own their lives the way you own this land fully, ferociously, without needing to explain. One day, they will be mothers too, and when they give birth, the child may not carry their husband's features, but it will carry theirs, their values, their spine, their judgment. That's what inheritance really means in Sparta. Not wealth, not even blood, but resilience. The ability to lead without noise, to hold without clinging, to lose without unraveling. And so you keep leading every day. Not because it's glamorous, not because it's thrilling, but because no one else will, no one else can, and that, in the end, is the most Spartan thing of all. You rarely say the word father aloud, not because it's forbidden, but because in Sparta, the role itself is diffuse, almost ceremonial. Your son knows who his father is technically, but it holds no emotional gravity. The name might be spoken once, early on, then filed away beneath the real authority, the agog, the training camps, the city itself. When your son was born, you held him just long enough to confirm what he was: a boy, whole, viable. Then he was washed, examined, weighed by elder hands that cared only for symmetry and sturdiness. They didn't ask how you were feeling. No one did. That's not Sparta's concern. You lay in bed that first night with muscles torn and belly hollow, and yet already you were expected to plan, to return to form, to monitor grain distribution and oversee labor. You bled in silence, not stoically, not because you were proud, because there was no room for indulgence. You don't remember the first time your son smiled. You were probably kneeling beside a vat of oil, elbow deep in the season's pressing. Someone may have called for you. He's doing that face again. That face, that soft, vulnerable proof that something real was beginning to form behind those small dark eyes. You walked over, wiped your palms, and looked. And yes, he smiled. You didn't cry. You nodded. Good. That means his lungs are clear. Because in Sparta, everything is evidence of survival. You rocked him with discipline. You fed him on schedule. You refused to coo. Instead, you taught him tone. He cried once, too long, for no reason. You didn't run to him. You waited. And when he quieted, you praised him not with affection, but with stillness. A long glance, a gentle nod. That's it. That's better. You became his sky, his law, his first formation of the world. Not warm, Not cruel, just constant. He learned fast. Spartan boys always do. At 5, he could run without stumbling. At 6, he could climb the olive tree's highest branch without command. At 7, he was taken. Not stolen. Taken, just as they said he would be. 2 men came calm, brief, firm. They said his name. He turned, eyes searching for yours. You didn't blink. You didn't kneel. You said, "Go, do well, don't look back." And he didn't. Not once. That was your success. You didn't cry that night, but your hands did not stop moving. You scrubbed the floors. You washed his linen. You arranged the amphorae. It was not grief. It was recalibration. You are no longer a mother in the daily sense. You are a mother in the mythic sense now. A sculptor who stepped back from her work and let it walk away. He belongs to the city. If he returns, he will do so as a man, a warrior. A name carved into the edge of the shield he now carries. If he dies, you will not wail. You will not wear black. You will cut your hair again, tie it behind your neck, and say, "He did what he was raised to do." You've seen other women do it. One of them, a friend, lost her only son last spring. He fell in battle near the Eurotas. When they brought his body back, she stood over him, examined the wound, nodded once, and said, "Forward." That's all. One word. Her husband sobbed. She did not. Later, you brought her food. She accepted it without thanks. Because this is how you love here, without decoration, without collapse, with alignment. Historians argue whether this kind of detachment is real or a costume, whether Spartan mothers were truly this composed or simply trained to perform. You don't think the difference matters. Emotion is a flame. Sparta is dry kindling. You either control the fire or you burn. And so you control it. You visit the temple more often now, not to pray, to witness, to stand still in the cool shade of carved columns and let time settle into your bones like river silt. The priestesses say nothing. They don't need to. You understand each other. They've sent sons too. Some never returned. Others did, but different, older, colder, etched. And you didn't embrace them. You asked what they needed. Food, cloak, rest. You provided. Then stepped aside. You hear stories always from outsiders about maternal devotion, about mothers who read poems, who weep over letters. You don't envy them. You pity them. Because grief there is endless. Here, it has a shelf, a boundary. It's not that you don't miss him. You do. But missing is not the same as mourning. Mourning paralyzes. Missing propels. You channel it into your fields, into your voice when you teach the younger girls how to tend flocks, into the way you adjust the hinges on the courtyard gate so it swings without complaint, into the silent, permanent way you stare at the northern hills and imagine him alive, alert, surviving. That's enough. That has to be, occasionally, a boy from the Agog passes by on a delivery or an errand. You scan his face, not for recognition, but for resemblance. Will your son's jaw square like that? Will he grow taller than his father? Will he remember the way you used to test him? Every morning, by making him recite his tasks before he could eat. You hope so, not because you want his love, but because you want his strength. That is your legacy. Not lineage, not affection, continuity. One day, you may see him again. Not in your home, but in formation, marching with the others, shining like polished obsidian. Eyes forward, jaw still. You will not wave. You will not call his name. But if his eyes flick toward yours just once, you will nod, and he will understand. That is the most you can give him, and the most he needs. Because the father may have passed the seed, but you taught him how to carry the blade. You learn, eventually, to recognize the sound of another woman's footsteps in your house, even before she speaks. It's not jealousy, it's calibration. The rhythm of bare feet on stone, the pause at the threshold, the breath she holds before entering a space that's not quite hers, but never entirely yours, either. She doesn't knock. No one does. That would imply a boundary. And Spartan homes are not built on division. They're built on function, on flow. You hear her and you don't rise. You let her come to you. She steps into the light. Her face is calm. She's younger, newer, not yet marked by birth or loss, but her eyes already carry that sharp glint of understanding. You nod, and she sits. No words, none needed, because you both know what this is. You've been her, and she may one day be you. She's been paired perhaps to your husband, perhaps to someone else's. She doesn't say, you don't ask. That's not the point. What matters is that the city has chosen, that the line continues, that the work endures. You pour her water. She drinks it. Her hands are steady. That's a good sign. You like her. She isn't timid, but she isn't careless either. She knows the rules, not the ones carved in stone, but the silent ones, the ones passed between women in glances and gestures, and the tone of a morning greeting. She asks, finally, will it always feel this strange? You don't lie, only at first. Then you both smile, not because it's funny, because it's true. Co-wives aren't rivals here. You don't compete for affection. You don't measure your worth in how often he visits. You measure it in sons born, in harvest managed, in stability maintained. That doesn't mean there's no tension. Of course there is, but it's the kind that sharpens, not the kind that rots. You might supervise the same household, raise children under the same roof, tend the same fire, but your roles are distinct. She will take the east room. You'll help her set it in order. She'll cook twice a week. You'll oversee the storeroom. You divide tasks like soldiers sharing patrols, not for convenience, but for efficiency. And when the man comes, he will pass between you, not with favor, but with function. And you will not watch. You will not listen. You will sleep, or pretend to, or polish the jars, or sit quietly in the yard and braid your hair, because this is not betrayal. This is agreement. Sparta has no room for sentimental chaos. Everything is structured, even the intimacy. You remember when you were her age, stepping into a house that smelled like crushed figs and worn linen, meeting the older wife for the first time. She'd watched you with a gaze like tempered iron, not unkind, just prepared. She had poured water too. She had told you, if he comes to you first, don't gloat. If he doesn't, don't sulk. You had nodded, too fast, but you never forgot. That woman taught you more about power than any man. She taught you when to speak and when to stay silent, when to press and when to withdraw. She taught you how to hold a household in place even when the roof cracked. And when she died quietly, without fuss, you took her place. Not just in the house, in the structure, in the chain. You feel her still, in the way you fold blankets, in the way you correct the young helots with a glance instead of a shout. That's legacy. Not a name on a stone, but an echo in habit. And now this younger woman, your co-wife, your shadow, your reflection is watching you the same way. You allow it. You want her to, because the strength of the city depends on this continuity, on women who don't crumble under shared titles or passing affections, on women who can sleep in the same home and not poison the well with envy. Historians still argue about this. They try to imagine what it must feel like to share a husband, to raise another woman's children, to have your own children raised by someone else. They write about tension, about suppression, about grief, but they rarely write about discipline, about women who see the long view, who understand that the man is not the prize. The city is, the bloodline is, the legacy is, and those things don't come from ownership. They come from orchestration. You meet the younger woman's gaze. She's asking something without words, permission, perhaps, or guidance. You give her neither. You give her presence. That's more valuable. You stand. She follows. Together, you inspect the food stores. The rain has ruined a few baskets of barley. You show her how to test the others, how to press, how to smell. She listens. She repeats your movements. This, too, is intimacy. Not touch, not words, shared knowledge. You remember once being in her place, learning how to press olives, how to soothe a fever without wasting herbs. The older wife had said, "Don't ask for praise. If no one complains, you've done well." And now you say it to the girl beside you. Her mouth tilts into a smile. She understands. Good. The men will not notice any of this. They will return and eat and sleep and leave. They will see the household in order and assume it happened by itself. But you and the other women know. You always know. The work behind the silence, the planning behind the peace, the strength it takes to run a household with no door that locks and no affection that anchors. You may not be friends with this woman, but you will protect her. You will not slander her. You will not sabotage her, because if she fails, the household suffers, and you won't allow that. Not for pride, not for principle, for survival. That's what binds Spartan co-wives, not fondness, but function, like pillars in the same temple. If one cracks, the roof collapses, so you maintain each other. You adjust, absorb, endure, and in doing so, you become more than wives. You become structure, and structure, here, is everything. You begin to understand, over time, that the word husband in Sparta doesn't mean what it means elsewhere. It does not conjure daily presence, soft glances, the comfort of idle conversation while peeling figs in the late morning light. It does not mean exclusivity or permanence or even familiarity. Your husband is more of an institution than a person and assigned partner. Yes, but also a functionary of the state, a vessel through which the city designs its lineage. He is yours, but not in the private sense. He is yours in the way a river belongs to its banks, passing through, reshaping you, but never stopping, never staying. He visits when allowed, and leaves before dawn. His voice is quiet in your home, almost ceremonial, the tone of someone fulfilling a rite. You do not expect affection from him, and when it comes, if it ever comes, it lands awkwardly, like a bird unfamiliar with perching. You remember one such moment he placed a hand on your shoulder after a long absence, thumb gently resting against your collarbone, and for a second you thought perhaps he would say something personal, something meant only for you. But instead, he asked whether the barley had been stored properly before the rains. You nodded. That was the end of it. You felt no resentment, just a brief, sinking recognition that this is what Spartan marriage is: not a sanctuary, but a station. And you hold that station with dignity. Historians still debate whether Spartan marriage was loveless or simply pragmatic. They point to the strictures, the rituals, the separation between men and their wives, the communal military life that dominated every man's adulthood. Some argue that the love was there, hidden beneath the structure, silent and unspoken like roots beneath stone. Others insist it couldn't have survived such arrangements. You don't argue either side, you live it. You know what it is to lie beside a man who has been ordered into your bed not by you, but by his elders, or by his own calculation. And still, you find ways to make space for something gentler, even if it is fleeting. There are nights when he arrives tired, weather-worn, mud crusting the hem of his cloak, and sits at the edge of your bed, just breathing. You hand him a cup of broth. He drinks slowly. The silence stretches. You don't fill it. You let it settle between you like a shared blanket. Sometimes that's enough. You do not try to become his friend. You do not chase the illusion of emotional intimacy. You build something else, a mutual acknowledgement, an alliance, a quiet knowing. You understand the limits of what you are allowed to expect, and you master the art of surviving within them. And the truth is, the marriage functions. It produces what it was designed to produce: children, order, the outward appearance of continuity. And behind that appearance, you live your life with discipline, with structure, with a deep understanding that you don't own this man, and he does not own you. You manage the estate, you raise the children, you train the next generation of women who will step into this same cold architecture and make it livable. You do not weep for what might have been. That is not the Spartan way. Instead, you learn to read his gestures like a soldier reads wind, carefully, silently, strategically. You know when he is likely to come. You know what foods he prefers. You notice when his left shoulder aches and warm the oil before he asks. Not because you seek praise, because you run this house, and efficiency is its own kind of intimacy. There are, of course, stories, whispers of rare marriages where something like love did grow, where a man returned often, lingered longer, laughed more freely, but they are treated almost like myths, indulgences, the exception rather than the rule. You don't envy those women. You watch them closely, because even a sweet thing, left exposed in Sparta, will rot. And they know it too. They temper their joy, keep it quiet, guard it like grain in a famine. You've never had such softness, and so you do not miss it. You do not feel cheated. You feel aligned, grounded, and in some ways, you believe this is stronger, because there is no betrayal. There is no heartbreak, only precision. And within that precision, there is stability. Your daughter asks once, shyly, what marriage is like. You tell her the truth. It is a contract between your body and the state, and between your hands and the land. She blinks, absorbing it like sunlight. You add, gently, if affection comes, accept it, but do not rely on it. Rely on yourself. She nods. She will be ready. You think of your own mother, how little she said, how much she taught through gesture alone, the way she salted food, the way she stood straight even when widowed, the way she kissed your forehead only once in your life, on the day you were sent to be matched and never again. Not because she did not love you, because she trusted you to carry her strength forward. And you did. You do. Your marriage, like hers, is not a space of softness, but of structure, and you've learned to admire that, to find in its edges a kind of peace, like stone warmed by sun. Your union with your husband may be hard, but it holds heat. There is warmth, if not comfort, and on the rare night when he says something unscripted, you've managed the vineyard well this year, or that child walks like you receive it like a treasure, not because you need it, because it confirms what you already know. He sees you, and that is enough, more than enough, because you are not here to be adored. You are here to build, to endure, to prepare the next generation to do the same. Your love is not a feeling. It is an action, a decision, repeated, daily, in silence, in shadow, in structure. You light the lamp, you lay out his cloak, you braid your hair, and when he enters, you stand not in submission, but in readiness, for whatever this night asks of you, for whatever this marriage means. Tonight, in this city, without walls. You hear them before you see them, two women at the edge of the market, voices low, heads bent together, speaking not with scandal, but with strategy. They are not gossiping. That word doesn't exist here the way it does in other cities, where women must whisper in corners to feel relevant. In Sparta, you speak plainly, but you still speak carefully, because every sentence carries weight. Every name mentioned out loud must be chosen like a weapon, sharp, swift, and necessary. You pause near the olives, pretending to inspect a cracked amphora, but really, you're listening. They're discussing a land dispute, something about boundary lines that shifted when the river swelled last spring. One of them has filed a complaint. The other is considering her next move. This is how power flows in Sparta, not through official decrees or loud declarations, but through quiet conversations between women who understand that the pulse of the city doesn't come from the battlefield. It comes from the kitchens, the storerooms, the inheritance ledgers locked in your mind. And the strange thing is, no one sees it unless they live it. Historians speak of Sparta as if it were a man's city, carved from shield and spear. But you know better. The men fight, yes, but the women remember. The women decide. You've seen fortunes shift because of a single remark passed during a weaving circle. You've watched an entire family rise or fall based on the way a widow aligned herself after her husband's death. And you've learned, slowly, that influence in Sparta is rarely loud. It's accurate. There are no salons, no poetry recitations, no dramatic scenes. There's a woman mentioning another's daughter's fertility over a bowl of lentils. There's a nod during a harvest inspection that means a marriage pairing has been approved. There's a slight change in the seating order at a funeral that tells everyone who is being elevated. and who is being left behind is. You've played this game long enough to know the rules. And the first rule is this: speak only when you have already won. Silence is not weakness here, it's bait. The loud ones don't last. You remember a girl once, newly married, who bragged openly that her husband had chosen to return to her 3 nights in a row. She was smiling when she said it. She meant no harm. But the others went quiet, just long enough to freeze the air. Within a week, she was no longer visited at all. Not out of cruelty, out of correction. In Sparta, humility isn't just valued, it's enforced. And so you learn to speak like a knife, hidden until needed. You say less than you know. You offer fewer opinions than you have. But when you do speak, everyone listens, because you've built that voice carefully, over seasons, over births, over losses. And it's not just your words that matter, it's your silence too. When you do not correct someone, it means more than if you had. When you remain seated after someone's name is called, it shifts the meaning of the room. You hold this power not like a torch, but like a seal pressed into things, permanent, unseen, and it is not yours alone. The other women around you carry the same weight. You respect them, you fear them, just a little, because they remember everything. Who contributed grain during the famine, who volunteered their husband to father a child when another woman's lineage faltered, who did not cry when her son died. These are the stories that shape Sparta, not the ones told in temples, but the ones told at wells. You sit with the other wives in the late afternoon, grinding herbs, threading beads, and each of you speaks in code. The child next door stumbles when he walks. She was pale at the last festival. That one's son hasn't written since winter. You nod. You record. You build a map in your mind. A living diagram of alliances, strengths, weaknesses. You never say, "We must act." You say, "She might need help with the barley this season," or "Perhaps someone should offer her sister a place to stay." These statements ripple. A visit is arranged, a pairing is suggested, a land transfer is prepared, and the city shifts again quietly, efficiently, under your hands. The men don't notice, or if they do, they say nothing. Let them think they hold the power. It's easier that way. You've seen what happens when men try to interfere in the women's net. They get lost, confused, burned, because this isn't a system of rules. It's a system of patterns. You don't control people, you guide outcomes. And when someone breaks the pattern, when a wife tries to hoard a lover, or a mother tries to elevate a sickly child, you don't confront. You adjust, subtly, decisively. You pull her further from the group. You stop offering advice. You let her float. And in time, she drifts out of relevance. Not hated, just bypassed. That's how it works. And everyone knows it. So you are careful. Not just with your words, but with your face, with your glances, with how long you linger after a joke. You sharpen yourself every day against the grain of other women's expectations, and in doing so, you become sharper, more precise, more necessary. You remember one winter, years ago, when a woman from another household tried to leverage her father's wealth to force a match between her daughter and a promising young man. She spoke too boldly, claimed too much. The response was swift. Her daughter was overlooked. Another girl, quieter, stronger, better trained, was selected instead. The first girl wept. The mother left town, and the story passed into legend not as a warning against ambition, but against clumsiness. You tell it to the younger wives now, not cruelly, with care, so they understand. This city survives not because of brute force, but because of balance. Every word, every marriage, every glance measured. The older you get, the more you feel it in your bones. The quiet dance of daily influence. And you know that when you're gone, they will remember not just your children, but your phrases. The way you said, "Let her decide," when someone tried to corner a girl into accepting a partner. The way you always looked at the hills before giving an answer. The way you never praised someone without also giving them responsibility. That's your real legacy. Not just land, not just lineage, language, tone, the architecture of suggestion. And so, when another woman approaches you today in the market and asks, Do you think my daughter is ready? You smile without smiling. You say, does she wake before dawn without being asked? The woman blinks, thinks, nods slowly, and you say nothing more, because that here is enough. You hear it first as a whisper at the baths, a name, followed by silence, followed by the subtle hush that always follows bad news. She's lost another child. The third, a woman you know, not well, but enough to remember the tight braids she always wore, and the way she laughed too loudly during festivals, as though trying to keep some ancient sorrow at bay. You don't rush to her. No one does. In Sparta, grief is not denied, but it is managed. You understand what must come next. She will be watched now, not with pity, with calculation, because in this city, motherhood is not just personal, it is public. And when a woman fails to deliver healthy sons, repeatedly, the city begins to reconsider her role, quietly, without insult, without confrontation. A different man may be suggested, a different pairing approved, not because anyone doubts her character, but because the state cannot afford sentiment, and neither can you. You know this because you've lived near the edge of that same scrutiny. Years ago, when your second daughter was born with a crooked spine, there were murmurs, not cruel ones, just administrative, as if your womb had become a ledger to be reviewed. You responded the only way a Spartan woman can, by offering no reaction. You fed the child, taught her to walk, corrected her posture with bindings, and returned to your duties as if no judgment had been passed. That's the only path here, compliance, not complaint. But now, watching this woman mourn in silence, you feel something stir, not sadness, not fear, a kind of tension, a tightening in your gut that says, this could be me again. You move through the market slowly, observing her as she walks with deliberate calm, her face unreadable. The other women say nothing, but you can see it in their posture. They've made their assessments, they're adjusting. You don't interfere, you simply take note, because in Sparta, a woman's fertility is not a private matter. It is civic duty. A failure to conceive, or to carry, or to birth viable sons weakens not just her household, but the entire chain of inheritance and bloodline. And though no one will accuse her of anything, she will feel it, in the silence after her name is spoken, in the shift of who is invited to offer counsel, in the absence of small, ordinary invitations. You've seen it too many times to pretend otherwise. There was another once, a friend of your mother's, who bore 4 children, all girls. She was patient, dutiful, tireless, but the city required sons. Eventually, her husband was encouraged by the elders, by other women, to take a second wife. Not a scandal, not a betrayal, a reallocation. The second wife bore twins, boys. The first wife said nothing. She continued to manage the household, to teach the girls, to host the rituals, but her voice and decisions weakened, not overnight, gradually, like erosion. You tell this story to your own daughter, carefully, not to frighten her, but to prepare her. Because here, motherhood is not a stage of life. It is a role in a machine that does not stop for sorrow. You've felt it yourself. The first time you bled too early, and knew the seed had not taken, you sat in the dark for an hour. No tears, just awareness. Then you rose, cleaned the linens, checked the grain levels, and resumed your day. Later, you mentioned it once to the elder wife, and she nodded. Again, she said, sooner this time. That was the only consolation offered, and you accepted it, because to want more is to open a door that has no hinges here. You walk past the woman again at the well. Her eyes meet yours. You don't speak, but you give the smallest nod, one only a Spartan woman would notice. It says, I saw, I know. I will not speak of it, and I will not forget. That is your solidarity, not comfort, but witness, and it must be enough, because tomorrow, she will be expected to rise and perform her duties like everyone else. No allowances will be made, no excuses accepted. She will pour oil, train girls, monitor rations, and perhaps, in time, she will be paired again. with another man, or she will not, and the city will quietly reshape itself around her, like a muscle learning to live with one less limb. Historians write endlessly about the glory of Spartan birth rituals, the singing, the bathing, the naming, but they almost never write about the voids, the ones that never quickened, the ones that came too soon, the ones who were taken and deemed unfit. Those silences are too quiet for history to hear, but you hear them. Every time you pass a woman with empty arms, every time a cradle remains unfilled, every time a girl trains harder than usual, as though trying to outrun the future, you know them, and you carry them, not as grief, as memory, as instruction, because every Spartan woman must be prepared to fail, and then continue. That is the unwritten vow you all make, not to succeed, but to endure failure without faltering. You do not mourn aloud. You do not plead. You realign. Always. You recall the story of a queen who bore no sons, but trained her daughters like heirs, married them strategically, and strengthened her family line more than any warrior ever did. That's your model. Not weeping, weaving, taking broken strands and making something stronger. You return home and light the oil lamp. Your daughter watches you, asking nothing. She's learning. Good. Let her learn early that softness, if kept, must be kept deep, that there is no mercy for those who lean too heavily on the wrong hope. You don't teach her to fear childbirth or to crave it. You teach her to be ready, to understand what it means to give the city what it wants, or to learn how to live when it takes more than it gives back. The woman who lost the child walks past your house that evening. Her posture does not break. She carries a basket of turnips. She nods at a neighbor. She sets the basket down. You do not run to her, but you open your door a little wider. That's all you can offer, and that is, here, an entire language of love. You sit beneath the colonnade as dusk softens the sky, and from where you rest you can see the young ones gathering barefoot, sun-warmed, hair tied back with linen bands. They're too old to be children, too young to bear sons, standing on the edge of Sparta's favorite ritual, the sacred games, where strength flirts with selection. This is no mere spectacle. It is not for applause. It is the quiet machinery of breeding at work. You remember it from your own girlhood, the anticipation, the awareness of every step, every glance, every curl of a finger watched not for beauty but for precision. This is how Sparta ensures the future, not by hiding its youth behind walls, but by exposing them to each other in motion. You were chosen at one of these games, not by love, by form, by movement. Your footwork had impressed a visiting elder. Your thighs were strong. You did not stumble. You had looked once at a boy with the courage not to look away, and that was enough. The arrangements were made a week later, quiet as always. That boy became your husband, or as close to it as any man in Sparta could be. Now you watch another girl, not yet 15, lift herself into a sprint. Her braid slices the wind. Her chest does not heave. She finishes first. You note her name. You note who notices her. These rituals are not secret, but they are sacred. They are not about vanity, they are about velocity, stamina, genetic promise. This is eugenics without shame, selection without sentiment, and everyone here accepts it, because this is Sparta, and Sparta must survive. You feel no discomfort as you observe them. You feel purpose. You understand why it's done. Historians still flinch at this. They call it brutal, call it calculated. They write about how girls were objectified, how youth was mined like copper, but they missed the agency. They missed the gaze that was returned. You were never told to smile. You were told to win. And if you won, you were watched. If you were watched, you were selected. And if you were selected, you were trusted with the most sacred task of all, continuing the city itself. The girl who won the race sits now in the shade, sipping salted water from a clay cup. A boy approaches. He doesn't leer. He doesn't boast. He offers her a fig. She takes it. They speak in low voices. You watch, not for gossip, for possibility. This is the earliest stage of pairing, and even now, it is choreographed in silence. If she is approached by another tomorrow, you will know something has begun. You will whisper it to the others. You will track it, not out of cruelty, out of necessity. These are not private lives. They are public investments. You remember how your own selection was confirmed, a second visit, a remark from an elder, a glance from your mother that told you the offer would be accepted. You did not weep. You did not swoon. You prepared. You took saltwater baths to cleanse your skin. You oiled your legs. You braided your hair in the style of your grandmother, who had borne 5 sons. You waited in the dark, the way it had always been done. And when the man came, he said nothing. He lay beside you, not as a lover, but as an offering. The act was quick, efficient, but it was not empty. It was designed. And when you conceived, you were congratulated not with flowers, but with firewood, olive oil, meat, practical gifts, useful things. Because that's what a pregnancy is here, useful, a sign of fulfillment, of design fulfilled. You feel no shame in that. You feel power, because in Sparta, to be a woman who bears well is to be more than wanted. It is to be necessary. And those girls out there, they want to be necessary. You can see it in the way they stretch, in the way they test their voices when they laugh loud. Clear, not giggles, but declarations. Their bodies are being shaped. Yes, but so are their futures, and no one is hiding it. No veils, no secrets, just sun and sweat and straightforward biology. You shift your weight, the stone is warm beneath you. The shadows lengthen. Another event begins wrestling now. The boys circle each other in sand, bare-armed and serious. It is not about victory, it is about observation. Who grapples with intelligence, who listens, who breaks the rules subtly but with finesse. You are not the only one watching. Other women sit nearby, heads tilted. You don't speak. You don't need to. The system hums beneath you like a loom. Matches will be proposed, houses will align, blood will mix and hopefully strengthen. That's the ritual. Sacred, repetitive, eternal. And when the games end, the girls will walk home barefoot. Their muscles sore, their futures nearer. Some will be visited, some will not. Some will conceive, some will wait. But none will feel cheated, because this isn't chance. It's Sparta. You stand, your joints creak. You walk slowly through the dispersing crowd. A young wife catches your eye. Her belly is just starting to swell. You nod to her. She beams, not with pride, but with readiness. She's already planning her return to training, to strength, to usefulness. That's how you know she will thrive. You pass the girl who won the race. She glances up. You meet her eyes. And in that look is everything: acknowledgement, expectation, acceptance. You say nothing. She does not speak. But the line has been cast. And tomorrow, it will be reeled in, or cut, or cast again. That is how Sparta chooses, not with hearts, with eyes, with lungs, with stride, with silence, and with you always watching, always remembering, always shaping the unseen script beneath the games. You've never worn a white dress. No veil has ever touched your brow. Your wedding was not a celebration, but a ceremony of subtraction hair. Home, privacy all stripped away, leaving you bare and ready for the role you were given. And yet, you remember the moment with clarity, not for what it gave, but for what it didn't. There was no feast, no procession, no music echoing in the hills. You were led to a dark room, hair shorn close to the scalp, dressed in a tunic like a boy's, and told to wait. That waiting has never truly ended. Even now, years later, older and seasoned, you realize that Spartan women don't wed men, they wed silence. They marry absence. They pledge themselves not to a partner, but to a duty. And that duty is never still. You did not cry. You were trained not to. But there was a moment, barely a breath, when you heard his sandals in the hallway, and something in your chest curled up in dread and hope. Tightly bound like a scroll not meant to be read, he entered without a word. No greeting, no ritual of romance. He touched you only as long as necessary. He left. You lay there, staring at the beams above, thinking, is this the beginning or the end? That question has never fully left you. Because in Sparta, love is not the foundation. It is a potential risk, something that might grow in the cracks and threaten the structure if left unattended. So they teach you to feel sparingly, to yearn with your back straight, to understand that wanting something does not entitle you to have it. You watch younger women, now brides, newly initiated, face the same rituals. Some tremble, some pretend not to. You admire the ones who walk into the dark with quiet readiness, not because they are fearless, but because they know what comes next will never belong to them. Your own husband is still a shadow. He has never lived beside you. He sleeps in barracks, eats with soldiers, trains with the same discipline you're expected to mirror at home. You see him perhaps twice a month, maybe more in winter, less in war. He enters the threshold like a figure from a state-sponsored dream present, but blurred around the edges. He does not tell you where he's been. You don't ask. When he speaks, it's in short sentences, mostly about crops, weather, your son's progress in the Agag. Once, he told you a story from a campaign. A man had died standing up. He said it with no emotion, just a fact. You imagined the image and nodded. That was your role to hear, to acknowledge, not to comfort. He did not ask for comfort, and you wouldn't have known how to give it. There are no soft words for Spartan wounds, only the understanding that everyone bleeds, and those who don't recover are buried without eulogy. You remember the first time he touched your face, not in intimacy, but to examine it. You had fallen during a training run, scraped your jaw on stone. He turned your chin, checked the wound, and said, "You need to be more careful." It was the closest thing to concern you ever received. You carry that moment like a relic, not because it was tender, but because it was real, unscripted, and that's rare here. You think sometimes about other cities, where men bring flowers, write verses, where women cry at weddings from joy. You do not envy them, but you wonder what it must be like to be chosen and cherished, not merely assigned and visited. That wonder is private, a thin thread you tuck beneath your tunic like a hidden stitch, never seen, never spoken, just felt. You've built a life without illusion. Your children were born without his hand in yours. Your griefs were buried without his shoulder beside yours. And yet, when he returns, you prepare his bed with care, not out of affection, out of order, because he is still your husband, not in the Athenian sense, not a companion or a cohabitant, but in the Spartan sense, a figure assigned to your lineage, your duty, your production. You call him mine only in the way you might refer to a tree that grows on your land, but whose fruit is gathered by someone else. You do not resent this. You respect it, because you were trained to understand that in Sparta, ownership is not affection. It is alignment, and alignment matters more than emotion. You have had moments, though flickers, glimpses, instances that almost felt like something warmer. One time, during a fever, you thought you heard him speak your name in a different tone. Not distant, not military, just present. You cannot be sure. It could have been the fever. It could have been a dream. But it lives in you like a tiny coal. Not enough to warm you, but enough to remind you that somewhere beneath all this structure, there are embers. You do not feed them. That would be dangerous. Love, here, is not a virtue. It's a liability. Women who ask for too much are quietly set aside, not punished, just removed, like a stone that doesn't fit into the wall. Sparta has no room for poor fits, and so you fit, you blend, you obey, you lead. You do not cry at weddings because there is nothing to mourn and nothing to celebrate, only a continuation, a new link in the chain, another body in another bed for another lineage to extend. You train your daughter the same way. You don't tell her that love is false, you tell her it is rare, and therefore not to be relied upon. You teach her posture, diction, how to calculate household numbers, how to read the shifts in a neighbor's tone. You give her the tools to survive. If affection finds her, good. If not, she will still rise. That's the Spartan way. And yet, sometimes, in the dark, when the house is quiet and your bones ache from work, you remember a moment from girlhood running down the hill at dusk, wind in your teeth, laughing for no reason, no structure, no assignment, just joy. You hold that memory like contraband. It's not allowed, but it happened, and so it is yours. Just like this marriage, not perfect, not warm, not chosen, but yours. In the only way anything can be in Sparta, by endurance. You rise before dawn on the day he leaves again, not because he asks it, but because you always do. His cloak is already folded, his sandals brushed clean of dust. You've made the meal he prefers before travel: salted fish, barley bread, a fig split clean in two. He doesn't thank you. That's not the custom. Instead, he eats with the silence of habit, and you sit across from him, your fingers resting on the clay edge of the water basin, steady, unshaking. This is how farewells are handled in Sparta, without ceremony, without softness, without illusion. You do not ask where he's going, and he does not offer. You both know the rhythm by now. The city calls, and he obeys, and you remain, as always, the keeper of the hearth and the ledger and the echo of his presence that never really settles, only passes through. When he finishes eating, he stands, adjusts his belt, glances at the door. You don't follow. You don't embrace. Instead, you meet his gaze once briefly, clearly, and he nods. That nod is everything. It is permission, recognition, continuity. Then he's gone. No footfall on the threshold, no turning back. Just absence where there was once shape. You stay in your seat for a moment longer, not because you're mourning, but because transitions in Sparta deserve stillness. Then you rise. You begin your day. Grain to count, girls to instruct, a courtyard wall that needs replastering before the rains. This is how you survive, by never stopping. And yet, as the sun climbs and your tasks unfold, a small crack forms in the smooth wall of your thoughts. You think, not for the first time, about what it means to belong to a man who never truly belonged to you. You have lain with him, borne him children, heard him speak in his sleep, and yet he remains more mystery than memory. You know the scent of his skin, but not the content of his mind. You've never heard him laugh fully, never known what dream he returns to at night. You've built your life beside a shadow, and you've learned to live with that. But today, for reasons you don't fully understand, that acceptance feels thinner than usual. You stand in the olive grove at mid-morning, pruning branches, and you find yourself wondering, not angrily, not sadly, just curiously, what it would have been like to be chosen, not selected, not assigned, but desired. What would it feel like to have a man wait for you? Not just appear, to have him trace the line of your collarbone, not an obligation, but an awe. That thought, is dangerous. It doesn't belong here. It belongs in the whispered poems of islanders, in the minds of Athenians with too much time and not enough war. But it visits you anyway, like a warm breath on the back of your neck. You let it pass. You return to your work. And still, it lingers. By midday, you've silenced it. You've given orders, checked storerooms, helped a younger wife prepare for her first pairing. She asked what to expect, and you told her the truth. Don't expect, just endure. She nodded, grateful, and for a moment, you felt strong again, necessary, clear. But the doubt returns that night, curled around the empty space where he sometimes sleeps. Not because you miss him, but because you're starting to realize you never knew if he missed you. And that's not something you can ask. In Sparta, the questions that have no answers are better left unspoken. You lie awake for a while, eyes on the ceiling, counting breaths, not to sleep, to stay measured, composed. And as the night deepens, your mind drifts not toward the man, but toward the idea of him, your husband, the father of your sons, the man who leaves and returns like a season. You think about how little he has said to you, and how much his silence has shaped your life. And then you wonder when he returns next. Will he notice the new wall you had built? The way you taught your daughter to fight with her offhand? The repairs you made to the west fence with your own fingers? When the helots failed to show, will he care? You don't know. You may never know. And yet, even this doesn't harden you. It simply affirms what you've always known, deep down, that love in Sparta is not a right. It is a luxury, one you are not owed, one that might never arrive. And yet, you live, you thrive, you command, you build, you hold an entire household in your hands without ever once expecting a hand to hold you back. And that is strength, real strength, not the kind that charges into battle, but the kind that rises every day without applause, without witness, and endures. Still, in the quietest part of you, the part that even you do not visit, often you allow a tiny hope that one day, just once, he will return and speak your name not like an address, but like a memory, that he will pause in the doorway, and instead of asking about grain or weather, he will say, "You have done well." That is all. A sentence, a softness, a moment of being seen, not as function, but as form, as a woman, as a person. You know better than to expect it, but still you keep a small space open for it, like a clean jar placed on a shelf no one uses, but never quite throws away. And if it never comes, you'll still go on, because you are a Spartan wife, and Spartan wives were not made for comfort. They were made for permanence, and permanence requires the kind of patience that erodes even hope, yet still plants seeds beneath it. So you sleep, you rise, you teach, you age, and you carry his name, not as a banner, but as a stone useful, weighted, silent. That is the life you were given. That is the legacy you will leave. Now the fire has cooled, the lamps have burned low, and even the stone walls around you seem to breathe slower. You've walked a long road tonight through ash-dark bedrooms and silent nods, past daughters with braided hair and wives who speak without sound. You've sat beside women who bear children for the state and watched men come and go like seasons, useful but never fully yours. And here, at the end, there are no dramatic revelations, only the echo of sandals across a hard floor, the scent of oil rubbed into calloused hands, the rhythm of survival stitched into every moment like thread through coarse linen. You may not remember every name you passed on that road. You may not recall the precise moment a girl became a wife, or a wife became a memory. But what remains is quieter, deeper, that sense of a life not built on love, but on something colder and somehow stronger. Endurance, structure, the discipline to live without asking for more than the city will allow. So let yourself settle now. Let the dust of Sparta fall from your thoughts like ash. Let the silence cradle you, not as punishment, but as permission. You do not need to be watched to be worthy. You do not need to be chosen to matter. You held your home in place. You kept the names alive, and you didn't break. Breathe in once, through the chest. Breathe out slowly, through the belly. Let the weight of the cloak slip from your shoulders. Let the house grow quiet around you. And sleep, not as surrender, as strategy, because tomorrow you rise again.